What is up, everyone, and welcome to the album review for the band Eternity and their new record, The Sirens. The Sirens was released on the 26th of October of 2018 via M Theory Records. It is the first album from the band Eternity in 10 years, since the Incurable Tragedy record back in 2008. A lot has happened. Had some lineup changes. Vocalist Stu Block departed the band in 2013 after having joined Iced Earth in 2011. He did really record the tracks Fukushima and Sandstorm with the band. He was replaced by Amanda Kiernan. We also had a guitar player and drummer change. Vocals on the record are handled by Amanda Kiernan, longtime guitar player and main man, founder of the band Tim Roth, and longtime bass player Troy Bletch handles a lot of the death growls. And overall, I think there's really good things about the record. I also think there's some not so good things about the record. Let's talk about it. It's an 8-track record. It is titled The Sirens. The first track is The Sirens. Eternity are a progressive death metal band, so you get a lot of different textures. You get a lot of melodies and very flashy guitar solos, a lot of sweeps, a lot of melodic guitar riffs. The first track on the record is Sirens, and it opens up strong. It opens up with a really beautiful orchestral arrangement. But that's where the first issue I run into comes in. It goes about 2 minutes too long, and the vocals don't actually come in until around the 3 minute and 35 second mark. It's a solid track. It's got some strong riffs. It's a familiar track. If you're a fan of the band, if you're a fan of Into Eternity, it's going to feel very comfortable. The riffs are very similar, and that winds up being an issue at points on the record. It does feature what I consider to be one of the best guitar solos on the record, and it's a really strong introduction to new singer Amanda Kiernan, and she is absolutely a highlight here on the record. Really, really, really enjoy her vocals when you get to hear them well. And that's an issue throughout the record. The production on the record is inconsistent. It's inconsistent in a lot of different ways. And as the record goes on, you start to notice that the aggressive vocals get mixed down and buried at points. The mix gets very muddy. So there are problems there. There's points where the guitars are incredibly rich. There's points where they're really muddy and you can barely make out the guitar tones. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. One of the most catchy tracks, in my opinion, on the record is the second track, The Fringes of Psychosis. The hook is infectious. It just gets in there and grabs you. It is one that I truly do struggle to get out of my head at points. And it's familiar Into Eternity riffing. The progression of the track rolls along, and it's really enjoyable. Other than the aforementioned mix issues, which honestly haunt the record from start to finish. They really do. Sandstorm's familiar if you're a fan of Into Eternity. You've heard the track. You can tell it was simply remixed with Amanda Kiernan's vocals in there and laid in there with Stu. You still hear him on parts of the track, as well as Fukushima later on in the record. It's a solid track, and it keeps pace with most of the record. This Frozen Hell comes in at track 4, and it has like all the tracks on the record, it has its good points. The band are from Canada. They're from Saskatchewan, and it's rather cold in Saskatchewan. And they've used the frozen, cold lyrical themes before. They used it in the track Timeless Winter off of the Scattering of Ashes record in 2006. In fact, when I saw them live back in 2007, when Stu was singing for the band, he introduced the track and said, "We're from Saskatchewan, Canada, and Saskatchewan, Canada is really cold. This is Timeless Winter." And the lyrical theme is there. It's all about the cold, frozen depths of Saskatchewan, and they're just really cheesy. Really cheesy, really cliched. There's a couple of really cool riffs in there, but they're also really familiar, and the track suffers from being bloated with length and instrumentals and solos that just don't necessarily need to be there. And this is another familiar theme throughout the record, and one of the negative points I have with the record is the songs are just over long. This Frozen Hell, the fifth track on, or correction, nowhere near the fifth track on the record, it's got some really strong vocal moments. It's a beautiful ballad. You get some strong yet really familiar and almost derivative acoustic guitar riffs. They sound like they could have come out of other tracks from the band, most notably Time Immemorial or Surrounded by Night from Scattering of Ashes. And Amanda really shined. She's got some great vocals here. Really enjoyable to listen to. One of the better mixed vocal segments on the record. Her and Tim do some really cool things together. But it suffers from being overly long. I would have cut the track at the 4 minute and 5 second mark because it builds up, it gets heavy, and then it's 3 minutes of repetition with a lot of soloing. And I just don't feel like it adds anything to the track. We get into another one of the really highlights of the record for me. Devoured by Sarcopenia, track 6. Great riffs, really killer hook, some phenomenal bass work from Troy, and really stellar vocals by all three of them, by Troy, by Amanda, and by Tim. Definitely one of the highlights of the record. I think it probably, along with Fringes of Psychosis, they are my two favorite tracks on the record. Fukushima comes in at number 7. It's a very powerful track, lyrically written about the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan. But you can tell it was remixed, and with the addition of Amanda's vocals, in addition to Stu's, because this was the second of the 2 Stu tracks that was released. And listening to them side by side, the reworked vocals have issues. You get into points right around the 2 minute and 20 second mark, and these aggressives are buried, and it happens a lot when Amanda Kiernan is using her higher pitched aggressive. They are buried deep down in the mix, and it's with any style of headphones. If you're listening to it with cheap headphones or with really strong studio headphones, I've found listening with multiple pairs and even on stereo systems that her vocals just get buried at a lot of points in the record, and it definitely happens on Fukushima. Final track on the record is The Scattering of Ashes Part 2, which is really interesting because there's no Scattering of Ashes Part 1. It is another ballad, and it closes with some really nice acoustic work and some orchestral arrangements. But again, it's very similar in composition to previous tracks from the band. It has a very similar composition to The Incurable Tragedy Part 3, which is the closing track off of the Incurable Tragedy record. And it's unfortunate that the record has so many points that sound like they could have come off other Into Eternity records, and they sound so derivative from other Into Eternity records. There's some phenomenal vocal work. The drumming is really strong, but unfortunately, it suffers from that bad mix. And the kick tone is really, really clicky. It sounds like somebody's repeatedly punching a raw chicken. It's just that thwack. It's buried. It's very clicky. It does resonate on some tracks. And depending on the track, it sounds better than others. There's even parts throughout the track that the kick tones sound different, and some of the drum sounds sound different. The mix overall is a real sticking point for me on the record. It's just not a good mix. It's not consistent, and it's not mixed well throughout. The levels are bad. And quite honestly, I just would never want Justin Bender to record another record for the band or for any band, just unless he demonstrates some improvement. I feel like the mix and even the tracking at points, I can hear some cymbal bleed on certain parts of the song, of songs bleeding into other mics. They just don't sound right. And with a band that is technical like this and do really pride themselves on the technical parts, and Tim Roth wanting to have so many different layers, it's really important to have a strong, cohesive, and consistent mix, and this record does not have that. So if you want a really well mixed progressive death metal record, this is not going to be it. The mix really pulls down the quality of the record. The other issues that I have with the quality of the record is, out of the 8 tracks on the record, you have 4 that are over 7 minutes. 1 that's just under 7 minutes, clocking in at 6 minutes and 59 seconds. And a couple of short ones. 1 medium length at 5:57 with Fukushima. But the songs that are that long don't need to be that long. They could be trimmed down to that 4-minute mark and be just as effective. You get a lot of the repetitive blast beat patterns and a lot of the very similar melodic harmonies and melodic guitar work and a lot of arpeggios in the soloing, a lot of sweeps. And it just tends to bloat the record. The songs are certainly enjoyable to a point, but I'll be curious to know, others of you that are fans, if you reach a cutoff point like I do, where you just want to skip through the track. I think it's a solid record overall. I won't say it's a good record. I think it has some really good points, but truly I think the production and the bloating of the songwriting really holds this back. All the players are incredibly talented, and new vocalist or current vocalist Amanda Kiernan is a find. She's got a great voice. She does some phenomenal vocal layering. She's got some range to her. I really enjoy her semi-aggressive vocals. Really enjoy a lot of her tonal range, and she really shines on both the aggressive and the tender moments. And it's unfortunate that you'll get into points where she's buried by the rest of the mix, and when the mix gets really muddy, there's points where the tracks will take off and the record just muddies up. And I wish the guitar tones were a bit thicker and a bit more articulate. So there is that other issue. If you're an Into Eternity fan, you're going to want the record. And there's going to be a lot that you're going to enjoy. If you are a new fan of the band, I truly cannot recommend this record for you. My advice would be to go out and pick up the Scattering of Ashes record, which I truly believe is their best. And if you like that, then you can start working through their catalog. But this is certainly not the record I would give to an Into Eternity fan, or to a new listener to Into Eternity, and get them started on the band. I think it's definitely more of a fan record, and I will certainly continue listening to tracks like Fringes of Psychosis and Devoured by Sarcopenia, Fukushima, and Scattering of Ashes Part 2. Rating wise, I give it a 7. I think that's a fair assessment of the record. I'd be tempted to give it maybe around a 6.8, but all things considered, and the inner fan in me screaming and just incredibly happy to have a new Into Eternity record, I give it a 7. I really look forward to hearing what they do next, and I hope the songwriting evolves a little bit. There is a slight bit of that letdown going, we got 10 years and we only get 8 tracks and this is what we get. But at the same time, I'm just happy to have them back. So, flaws and all, it's a record I'll still listen to. And I think it was a record that will possibly grow more. But after 60, 70 listens to it, my feelings are where they are. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I look forward to getting more album reviews up for you. Welcome back into Eternity. I hope to hear your evolution and more stuff from you at some point soon. And I do wish the band the best. Thank you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for checking out the review. Thank you to my law enforcement, military veterans, and first responders for what you do every single day. As always, you have been awesome. I have been Baldman. I will see you in the next one. Be excellent to each other and keep head banging.